The sun dipped low over the city of Veralis, casting long shadows across its obsidian towers. The streets, normally alive with chatter and trade, were silent with expectation. Today was the festival of ascendancy, a day when the monarchy displayed its power, and when whispers of treachery were punished in full view of all. Lady Ilara moved through the crowd, her heart pounding against her chest like a wild drum. She had been summoned unexpectedly to the Grand Plaza, and though she had heard rumors of plots and betrayals, nothing had prepared her for this public spectacle. Nobles in silk robes leaned from balconies, their eyes sharp with curiosity and hidden malice. Citizens crowded the marble steps, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. All eyes turned toward her as she was led through the towering gates. Her hands were bound loosely with a silver cord, a mockery of captivity. She wore her finest gown, but it now felt like a shroud, a costume for her humiliation. Even the gentle breeze seemed to conspire against her, lifting the hem of her dress as if to draw attention to her vulnerability. At the center of the plaza, a dais of black marble rose above the crowd, and upon it sat King Kalen. His presence was absolute. Even from a distance, his gaze could command obedience. Rumors surrounded him like a storm cloud. He was a ruler who showed no mercy, a king whose justice was as sharp as the blade at his side. Yet today, he watched silently, his eyes fixed on her, as if weighing her very soul. The herald stepped forward, his voice echoing across the plaza. "Lady Ilara of House Veralis," he proclaimed, "you stand accused of betraying the crown. For your crimes, you shall kneel before all, and receive judgment in sight of every noble and citizen." A hush fell over the crowd. The word betrayal clung to the air like smoke. Ilara's chest tightened. She had done nothing wrong, yet here she was, dragged to the center of the world, expected to bow and submit. She lowered herself slowly, but her eyes did not falter. Pride still burned within her, even in the face of scorn. Whispers rippled through the plaza, some cruel, some curious. She dared defy the king's command. Does she not fear death? Look at her so proud, even now. The shame was not only in the act of kneeling, but in the weight of every gaze upon her. Each pair of eyes seemed to pierce her skin, judging her worth. She could feel her pulse in her temples, hear it in her ears. The plaza felt colder than it was. The sunlight dimmed, and shadows crept unnaturally along the black stone. And then she felt it a presence unlike any other. Kalen's eyes were on her, sharp and unyielding. It was not hatred she saw there, nor pity, but something that unsettled her more. Curiosity. A king who saw through masks, who could sense the truth beneath the lies and theatrics of court, and perhaps even beneath her own carefully held facade. The herald continued, recounting her supposed crimes, weaving a tale of treachery and disloyalty. Ilara's stomach churned. Every word was a blade meant to cut her reputation, her family, her very identity. She wanted to cry out, to demand justice, but the law forbade it. She could speak only when allowed. And right now, she had been granted no mercy. The crowd began to jeer, soft at first, then louder. The sound grew, a wave of mockery that threatened to sweep her away. She forced herself to remain still, chin high, spine straight. If she showed fear, if she showed weakness, she knew they would delight in her ruin. And yet, every whispered insult, every scornful glance, was a dagger to her pride. Then came the unexpected. Kalen rose from his throne. The crowd fell silent at the movement, as if the city itself held its breath. His cloak, dark as night and embroidered with silver sigils, swirled around him like a shadow come to life. Each step he took toward the dais resonated with authority. Every eye followed him. Every heart paused. When he reached the base of the dais, he did not raise his hand in judgment. He did not speak harsh words or condemn her aloud. Instead, He stopped and regarded her silently. The plaza seemed to shrink around them. The sun dimmed, and the wind hushed. For a moment, it was as if the world itself waited for his decision. Ilara's breath caught. Her body, tense with fear and humiliation, stiffened even further. Yet she did not look away. Kaelin's gaze was intense, and though it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments, there was a strange warmth hidden beneath the steel. She could not tell if it was pity, amusement, or something entirely unfamiliar. "Rise," he said, his voice low but powerful, reaching her ears alone despite the thousands around them. Shock rippled through the plaza. The crowd gasped. Some whispered disbelief. Others stared, unsure of what they were witnessing. Ilara hesitated. Her knees ached, her heart raced. But something in that voice, in the force of his command, made her rise. She stood, trembling slightly, yet taller than before. The humiliation did not vanish, but it transformed. She was no longer simply a girl dragged before the world. She was a figure of quiet defiance, an unwilling participant in a game much larger than she understood. Kaelin approached her, close enough that she could see the fine lines of his face, the sharpness of his jaw, the way his eyes held storms and secrets. "You are stronger than they believe," he murmured, a statement more than a question. "Yet strength alone does not save one in this city. Courage does. And courage is something I see in you. Lady Ilara." The words were dangerous. They carried hope, but also a warning. In this city, any attention from the Alpha King could be both blessing and curse. To be noticed was to be marked, and the mark could be lethal. Ilara's heart wavered between fear and intrigue. Here, in the center of her shame, she felt a strange lift, as if the weight of the crowd's judgment had been lightened, if only slightly, by his recognition. Her pride stirred, mingling with a confusing curiosity about the man who could both terrify and enthrall her. The herald, uncertain of the king's intentions, cleared his throat. "The judgment," he began, but Kaelin's hand rose, silent yet commanding. The words died in the air. No one dared continue, not even the voices of the jeering crowd. Kaelin studied her for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that shocked all who watched, he extended his hand not to strike, not to punish, but to guide her. "Step forward," he commanded, and in that single movement, the meaning was clear. She was no longer merely a subject to be humiliated. She was being lifted, not just from her knees, but above the scorn, above the whispers, above the cruelty of all who sought to shame her. Ilara's fingers brushed his, tentative but not afraid. The plaza remained still, the citizens caught in the tension between fear and awe. Even the nobles, usually so quick to sneer, were silent. They had never seen the Alpha King act with such intent, such focus, and the effect was mesmerizing. In that moment, Ilara realized something profound. Her fall from grace had been public, but it had also been a crucible. In her kneeling, she had endured the eyes of 1,000 judges. In rising, she was discovering a new form of strength, a form that did not depend on power, wealth, or status, but on the courage to meet her fear, head-on. Kaelin's gaze softened slightly as he whispered, almost to himself, "Perhaps you are more than they believe." Ilara felt a shiver run through her. The humiliation had not disappeared, but a seed of possibility had taken root. The world of Werewolves, dark and treacherous, was still dangerous, still filled with whispers and schemes. Yet for the first time, she glimpsed the glimmer of a path where she might not be merely a pawn, but a player in her own right. The crowd, sensing the shift, remained silent. The jeers had vanished, replaced by curiosity, uncertainty, and awe. The girl who had knelt in shame now stood, guided by the most feared and revered figure in the kingdom. And in that charged silence, a story began. A story of power, of courage, of unexpected alliances, and perhaps something far more complicated than either of them could yet name. As the sun dipped completely behind the towers, casting the plaza into twilight, Elara and Kaelin stood together. Neither spoke further, yet the weight of understanding hung between them. The festival was far from over, and the court's games were just beginning. But something had shifted irreversibly. The Alpha King had lifted her higher than all others, and in doing so, had changed the rules of the game forever. And Elara knew, deep in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The moon rose high above Werewolf, casting silver light over the black towers and streets of the city. The plaza, once filled with crowds and jeers, was now quiet, emptied of the spectators who had watched Elara's public humiliation. Only the Alpha King and the girl he had lifted from disgrace remained, bound together by a moment that neither fully understood. Kaelin led her through shadowed corridors of the palace, corridors lined with statues of kings and warriors long dead. Their eyes seemed to follow her, judging silently, as if the stone figures themselves were witnesses to every heartbeat of the living. The air was thick with incense, and the faint hum of magic that lingered in the halls. A remnant of the old curses that had shaped the city and its rulers. Elara's hands were still loosely bound, but Kaelin did not hurry her. He walked beside her with measured steps, each one echoing with authority. Though she had feared him in the plaza, now, in the quieter halls, she sensed a different power, a controlled, contained strength that demanded respect rather than submission. "You have courage," Kaelin said softly, his voice filling the corridor without raising it. Most would have crumbled under their gaze. Most would have begged for mercy or bowed without spirit. You did neither. Elara swallowed, her throat tight. "I have no choice but to face them," she whispered. Her voice was low, almost lost in the shadows, yet she felt the weight of his attention on her. It was heavy, but not threatening. Strange warmth brushed against the edges of her fear. "You always have a choice," Kaelin replied, his eyes meeting hers. "Even here, even now. Courage is not only in enduring punishment, it is in choosing how to respond. You could kneel forever and let them crush you, or you could rise and claim a new path." Her heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken to her like this, acknowledging her fear while showing a way to transform it. The palace was filled with whispers of magic, of kings and queens who ruled not only through law, but through supernatural influence. And yet, here was Kaelin, not demanding submission, but offering recognition, even respect. They arrived at a small chamber near the tower's peak. Candles flickered along the walls, casting shadows that danced like living things. Kaelin gestured for her to sit on a stone bench. For the first time since morning, Elara felt her body begin to relax, though her mind remained alert. "The court will not forgive easily," Kaelin said. "They are quick to judge and slow to understand. And yet, they must see what I see now." His words held weight, but he did not explain further. She sensed a plan forming in his mind, one that involved both danger and opportunity. Elara's gaze drifted to the balcony beyond the chamber. The city sprawled beneath them, streets winding like dark ribbons, towers piercing the sky. She thought of the festival, the jeers, the whispers that had called her a traitor. And now, she wondered, was she still a pawn? Or could she become a player? Kaelin studied her silently for a moment, then reached for a silver cord that had bound her hands. With deliberate care, he loosened it completely. "You are free," he said. "Do you understand the meaning of that word here?" Elara looked down at her hands, once bound and now free, yet trembling slightly. I think I do," she said. "Freedom is dangerous here." "Yes," Kaelin agreed. "Danger and opportunity walk side by side in this city. Only those who understand both can survive and thrive." He leaned slightly closer, his gaze intense. "Tell me, Lady Elara, Do you wish to survive, or do you wish to rise? 2. The question lingered like a challenge in the candlelight. Elara felt the weight of it pressing into her chest. To survive meant submission, careful navigation, and hiding her true self. To rise meant risk, confrontation, and perhaps even standing against the Alpha King himself. And yet, something in her stirred. Something she had not felt since childhood. A spark of daring, of rebellion, of potential. I want to rise, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. Even if it is dangerous. Kaelin's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Good. Then listen carefully. Your rise will not be simple. The court is poisoned with envy, fear, and old grudges. They will seek to manipulate, to humiliate, to destroy you. But there is a way to turn the tide. He handed her a small crystal vial, filled with swirling silver mist. This contains a fragment of old magic, a gift from my ancestors. It will reveal those who seek your ruin, and it will shield you from the eyes of those who lie. But it can only be used with trust and courage. Elara took it cautiously, feeling the warmth of the mist through the glass. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. And, what do you wish in return? She asked, suspicion flickering in her chest. Kaelin's eyes darkened slightly, thoughtful. I ask nothing, at least not yet. But your survival will become linked to mine. Our fates are now intertwined, whether you wish it or not. The court may see you as a pawn, but I see you as an ally. Perhaps even more. More. Elara felt her cheeks warm, but she did not speak. The word hung between them, fragile yet charged. She was not certain if he meant friendship, respect, or something far more dangerous and magnetic. Whatever it was a thread, weaving them together, binding their futures in a way neither could fully understand. Kaelin stood and motioned for her to follow him to a hidden chamber deeper within the tower. There, maps of the city and diagrams of the palace were spread across a wide table. Kaelin traced lines with long, deliberate fingers, pointing to areas of influence, secret passages, and points of vulnerability. You must learn quickly, he said. The court moves like a storm, striking where you least expect. You will need allies, and you will need courage. But most importantly, you will need to trust yourself. And sometimes me. Elara listened, absorbing every detail. She realized how little she truly understood about the city she had lived in all her life. The festival, the jeers, the accusations, it had been a small window into a far larger game. And now, for the first time, she felt she might play it on her own terms, rather than be swept along helplessly. Night deepened around the palace, and the city below seemed to shimmer in moonlight. Kaelin paused, studying her face. I will not lie to you, he said. There will be moments when you feel alone. Moments when the court's power seems overwhelming. But do not falter. Courage is contagious, and strength often comes from the smallest spark. Elara nodded, her chest tight with emotion. I will try, she said. Kaelin's expression softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through the mask of the Alpha King. Trying is not enough. You must decide that you will rise, that you will endure, and that you will meet every challenge with heart. Only then will you be more than a girl who knelt in shame. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Elara felt a stirring in her chest, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and something dangerously close to hope. She had faced humiliation, jeers, and accusations. And yet here she was, standing beside the most powerful man in the city, being offered a chance at transformation. And then, a sudden sound shattered the quiet, a distant echo of movement in the shadows. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, sharp and alert. They are already plotting, he said. "The court does not forgive. They do not forget. If we are to rise, we must act before they strike." Elara's pulse quickened. The danger she had felt in the plaza was nothing compared to this. The city's power, its hidden curses, and its subtle betrayals were far more intricate than she had imagined. And yet, alongside fear, there was an excitement she could not deny. Kalen turned to her, his gaze steady and commanding. "Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, we begin the work that will change everything. But remember this: your strength is not in submission. Your power is in courage. And courage is the gift that will lift you higher than any who would shame you." Elara swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words deep within her. She had knelt in shame, endured the jeers of thousands, and yet, here, in the quiet of the palace, she began to understand that her story was not finished. It was only beginning. The moon cast silver light across her face as she realized something even more profound. Her rise would not come from the favor of others, nor from power alone, but from the fire she carried within, a fire that no mockery, no curse, no shadow of fear could extinguish. Kalen watched her silently, aware that the path ahead would test them both. The court's games were only beginning, and danger lurked in every corner. But he also knew something else. Elara was no ordinary girl. She was a spark that could ignite change, a force capable of standing beside even the Alpha King. And as they stood together in the flickering candlelight, the first steps of their journey had been taken. The game had shifted. The pawn had risen. The night had deepened into a velvet darkness over Werewolf. The city, with its jagged towers and twisting streets, seemed alive with whispers and secrets that slipped through the cracks of the obsidian stone. Lady Elara had spent the hours since the Festival of Ascendancy learning what it meant to stand not as a victim, but as someone who might command her own fate. Kalen moved through the corridors of his fortress with the silent grace of a predator, his cloak brushing against the cold stone walls. Elara followed closely, sensing a tension in the air that was different from the one in the plaza. Here, there were no witnesses, no jeers, no mockery. Here, the Alpha King and the girl he had lifted above humiliation were alone, with shadows and secrets. "You must understand something," Kalen said, his voice low, careful, as if the walls themselves could overhear. "The court is poisoned. Envy, fear, and old grudges twist every word, every gesture, every smile. They will strike where you least expect it. And some of them would see you broken for sport." Elara nodded. The weight of his words pressed on her, but there was also clarity. She had seen their cruelty in the plaza. Now, she could see the shape of it, understand the lines of power, the currents of influence that moved invisibly beneath every polite bow and cordial nod. Kalen led her to a chamber at the edge of the fortress, a room seldom used, lined with tapestries that depicted battles and kings from centuries past. Their eyes followed her from the threads, silent witnesses of history's triumphs and failures. On a small table lay scrolls, maps, and an assortment of objects that hummed faintly with magic. "This is where you will learn to see beyond what is obvious," Kalen said. "To survive, to rise, you must know the currents beneath the surface. Knowledge is as sharp as any sword." Elara bent over the maps, tracing streets and alleys, courtyards and hidden passages with her fingers. The city she thought she knew now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows and traps. She realized how vulnerable she had been, how little she had understood about the forces that shaped every action in the palace. Kalen watched her, his eyes like molten steel. "You have strength," he said quietly, almost to himself. "And yet, strength without awareness is fragile. Courage alone is not enough. You must be cunning. You must anticipate their moves before they are made." Elara looked up, meeting his gaze. Kalen's expression softened, though the fire in his eyes remained. Good, he said. Fear is not weakness. Fear is a signal. It tells you where danger lies and where your courage is needed most. You must walk with fear, not run from it. Only then will you be unstoppable. For the first time, Ilara saw him not as the Alpha King who could crush her, but as a man who had survived countless dangers, who had endured betrayals and curses, and who carried both strength and burden in equal measure. She felt a strange mix of fear, respect, and something more, something that stirred in her chest and left her heart both heavy and light at the same time. Kalen moved closer, lowering his voice. There is another danger, he said. Something older than the court, older than the city itself. A curse that hangs over Werewolves, whispered in tales and half-forgotten songs. It seeks hearts unguarded, spirits untested, and it will try to claim you if you do not resist. Ilara shivered, not from cold but from the weight of the revelation. It was a force that required strength of spirit, courage of heart, and trust in those who walked beside her. You will not face it alone, Kalen continued, his voice steady, commanding. I will stand with you, but even I cannot shield you from every shadow. You must be vigilant, for the darkness tests everyone differently, and sometimes it tests those closest to us. Ilara's fingers gripped the edge of the table. I will not fail, she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. The stakes had grown higher than she could have imagined. And yet, there was a fire within her, a spark that refused to be snuffed out by fear or shame. The room was quiet, except for their breathing and the faint hum of the magical artifacts around them. Then, suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a soft, almost imperceptible shift from the shadows. Kalen's eyes snapped to the source, sharp and alert. They are here, he said. Not all threats are obvious. Not all enemies wear the face of the court. Ilara felt her pulse quicken. The plaza, the mockery, the whispers, it had all been only the beginning. The true danger was hidden, moving, unseen, patient, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Kalen stepped closer, his presence a shield of power and authority. Stay close, he commanded. Do not move unless I say. And trust me. Ilara nodded, her breath shallow, her senses sharpened. She had never felt such intensity before. Such a combination of fear, anticipation, and something she could not name. It was thrilling and terrifying at once, and it tied her heart inexplicably to the man beside her. The shadows shifted, and from them emerged a figure tall, cloaked, with eyes that glimmered in the candlelight. Kalen's hand went to the hilt of his sword, but he did not draw it. Instead, he regarded the intruder with a measured calm, the air around him vibrating with controlled energy. You should not be here, Kalen said, his voice low and dangerous. The figure inclined its head, almost mockingly. And yet, I am, it replied. The city whispers of your little ally, Kalen, the girl who rose when all mocked her. I wish to see if she is truly as brave as they say. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The intruder's words were not merely observation. They were a test, a challenge, a provocation. And yet, in her chest, something stirred. She was no longer simply afraid. She was aware, alert, ready to meet the challenge, even if she did not yet understand it fully. Kalen's eyes never left the figure. Do not underestimate her, he said. She has more courage than you can imagine, and more strength than you give her credit for. The intruder laughed softly, a sound that echoed like wind through empty halls. We shall see, it said, and without warning, vanished into the shadows once more, leaving only the faintest trace of movement in the air. Elara's hands shook slightly, though she held her ground. "A messenger of the curse," Kalen replied, his expression darkening. "Or perhaps a test sent by the court itself. In Werewolves, threats are never simple, and enemies rarely show their faces directly. You must learn to see what others cannot, to anticipate before it is too late." Elara swallowed hard. The stakes had grown higher, the dangers more complex, and the path ahead filled with shadows she could not yet fully see. Yet, alongside the fear, there was also an undeniable thrill, a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished. Kalen studied her, his gaze intense. "Tonight, you rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we begin the true work. But remember this: courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of it. And trust can be the most dangerous weapon of all." Elara nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink into her. She had knelt in shame, had been mocked, and yet she was learning that her power was not in avoiding fear, but in facing it, head on. And she realized something profound. The Alpha King had not merely lifted her from the plaza. He had lifted her into a world of possibilities she had never imagined, where courage, wit, and heart could change her destiny. As she settled into a quiet corner of the chamber, watching the flickering candlelight, Elara felt a new determination take root. She would face the shadows, confront the threats, and rise above the scorn and cruelty of the court. And perhaps, though she dared not say it aloud, she would discover something deeper, something connecting her to the Alpha King in ways neither of them yet understood. Outside, the city of Werewolves slept under the watchful gaze of the moon. But inside the fortress, in the heart of darkness and light, the first steps of a dangerous, thrilling journey had begun. A journey of courage, trust, and the stirring of a bond that could change the fate of both the girl and the king. And somewhere in the shadows, the whispers of old curses and unseen enemies waited, ready to challenge everything she had just begun to discover about herself and about the man who had lifted her higher than all. The first light of dawn broke over Werewolves, painting the obsidian towers in shades of gold and crimson. The city, still shrouded in the lingering shadows of night, seemed to hold its breath, aware that today would be different. Lady Elara stood at the highest balcony of Kalen's fortress, the wind tugging gently at her hair and cloak. The plaza below, which had once been a place of her deepest humiliation, was now empty, awaiting the return of the court and the citizens. Elara's heart beat steadily, but with a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. The events of the past nights had changed her. She had faced fear, deception, and shadows that moved unseen, and she had survived. She had learned that courage was not simply enduring punishment, it was rising above it, claiming power in moments when others expected her to falter. Kalen approached silently, as he always did, his presence commanding yet comforting. "Today," he said, his voice low and steady, "the court will see what it means to underestimate you. The city will witness the rise of someone they believed broken. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?" Elara turned to him, her gaze steady. "I am," she replied, "not just to survive, but to rise." A faint smile touched Kalen's lips, rare and fleeting. They descended to the plaza together. The air was charged with anticipation, as if the city itself sensed the change in power. Elara's steps were confident now, no longer hesitant. The people of Werewolves would soon see that the girl who had knelt in shame was no longer the same. The court arrived shortly after, nobles and officials in their finest robes, faces painted with curiosity, fear, and envy. They had heard rumors of the girl's strange survival, her newfound courage, and the mysterious alliance with the Alpha King. Yet none were prepared for what was about to unfold. Kalen raised his hand, commanding silence. The plaza stilled instantly. even the wind seeming to hold itself at bay. "Today," he announced, "we witness not judgment, but truth." Elara stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "I was accused of betrayal," she said, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. "I was made to kneel, to be humiliated, to appear weak before all. But today, I stand not in shame, but in courage, and I am not alone." Gasps spread through the court. Whispers rose and fell like waves. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. The citizens leaned forward, drawn by the unfolding drama. Kalen stepped beside her, his presence a shield of authority. "She has endured more than any of you can imagine," he said, his voice carrying across the plaza. "Her courage has been tested by fear, by shadows, and by deceit, and she has risen, stronger than ever. Anyone who doubts her now will see the truth for themselves." Elara raised her head, feeling a strange, liberating power surge through her. The memory of her humiliation, the jeers, the whispers, the false accusations was still there, but it no longer held dominion over her. It was fuel now, a fire that burned with clarity and purpose. "Enough words," Kalen continued. "Let those who challenge us step forward." From the crowd, figures emerged, those who had plotted against her, who had whispered that she was weak, that she could be broken. But as they stepped into the open, they found themselves facing not a trembling girl, but a woman of poise and strength. Beside her, Kalen's presence was absolute, his gaze sharp and unwavering. One by one, the challengers faltered. Their insults, their threats, their schemes, all crumbled in the face of Elara's courage and Kalen's unyielding authority. She met each gaze with calm defiance, every word she spoke carrying a weight that had once been denied her. The crowd watched, silent and amazed. The nobles, who had mocked and scorned her days before, now bowed subtly, acknowledging not only her strength, but the undeniable bond between her and the Alpha King. Even the citizens, who had once jeered, now whispered her name with awe. Elara felt a hand brush hers. It was Kalen, steadying her, grounding her in the moment. She looked up at him, and for a brief second, their eyes met in understanding, respect, and something far deeper. They had faced the court's cruelty together, navigated shadows and secrets, and now they stood victorious. "You have done well," Kalen whispered, his voice only for her. "You have risen above what they believed they could use to break you. You are more than courage. You are strength itself." Elara felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and something she could not yet name. "We did it," she said softly. "Together. We. Kalen's lips curved into a rare, approving smile. The court had witnessed the transformation, and the city seemed to hum with new energy. Whispers of her bravery spread like wildfire, and the challengers, once confident in their schemes, now retreated into shadows, uncertain of the power they had underestimated. Elara's gaze swept across the plaza. She had stood in shame here, had knelt while the world mocked her. And now, she stood tall, recognized not for her supposed failures, but for her courage, her intelligence, and her resilience. She realized something profound. True strength was not granted by others, it was claimed, step by step, choice by choice. Kalen gestured toward the throne he had once occupied alone. "Come," he said. "Let us show them that strength can be shared, that leadership is not solitary, and that courage, when recognized, elevates all who wield it." Elara moved forward, stepping beside him. Together, they ascended the steps, the crowd falling silent, in awe. When Kalen lifted her onto the throne beside him, it was not a gesture of dominance, but one of recognition and equality. The girl who had knelt in shame was now elevated above the scorn, the mockery, and the doubt of all who had once sought to diminish her. The sun broke fully over the city, bathing the plaza in golden light. Elara felt the warmth on her face, a symbol of new beginnings. The city's shadows were still there, as they always would be, but she no longer feared them. She had faced the court's cruelty, endured threats both seen and unseen, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more courageous than ever. Kaelin's hand brushed hers, a silent acknowledgement of their journey, their trials, and the bond forged in the fires of fear and triumph. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "The court will always test you, the city will always challenge you, and the shadows will never fully disappear. But you will always rise." Elara nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. She had risen from shame, faced danger and deceit, and claimed her place not by force alone, but by courage, heart, and steadfast resolve. And beside her, the Alpha King remained, a partner in both leadership and life, a presence that grounded her, while also inspiring her to reach higher. As they looked out over Werewolf, a subtle wind carried the whispers of the city. But this time, they were not whispers of mockery or fear. They were whispers of respect, of awe, and of acknowledgement for the woman who had risen above shame, and for the bond that now stood unbroken between her and the Alpha King. Elara felt a quiet smile form on her lips. She had been tested, humiliated, and challenged in ways she had never imagined. But she had endured, and in doing so, had discovered a strength that was hers alone. She had risen higher than all, not by subservience, not by fear, but by courage, by intelligence, and by heart. Kaelin's voice, low and warm, reached her again. "You have changed this city, Lady Elara, and perhaps, in time, you will change me as well." Ilara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She saw not the Alpha King of legend, not the ruler feared by all, but the man who had stood beside her through fear and shadow, who had recognized her courage and elevated her beyond scorn. She began, then paused, her heart full. Words seemed unnecessary. The bond they shared, forged in trials, shadow, and courage, spoke more powerfully than any declaration. Together, they sat upon the throne, a symbol of transformation, courage, and the triumph of the human spirit against cruelty, deception, and darkness. The city of Werewolf had witnessed the rise of a girl who had been made to kneel in shame, and the power of a king who saw her true worth and lifted her higher than all. And in that moment, the city, the court, and even the lingering shadows seemed to recognize a new era, one where courage and heart were stronger than mockery and fear, where respect and trust could elevate even the humblest soul, and where the bond between two extraordinary individuals could reshape destiny itself. The wind carried the faintest whisper of future challenges, for even in victory, the city's shadows never fully vanished. But for now, Elara and Kaelin remained side by side, rulers of the moment, partners in courage, and proof that even in a world of darkness, light could rise and rise higher than all.